Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. Can you hear me this time?
We can, thank you.
Thank you. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I want Australians to stop being slaves and to start living freely. Let's look at some facts. Australia's death toll from COVID stands at over 650. Let's compare Taiwan, with a similar population of 24 million compared with Australia's 25. Taiwan, with a similar population on a tiny island, higher population density, making virus transmission far easier. Taiwan, close to mainland China, the virus source. Taiwan, with an earlier importing of the virus into their shores than in Australia. Taiwan, with far more people moving to and from China. Well, how many deaths have they suffered in Taiwan? 7. Not 700, 7. And while we locked up everyone in quarantine and trashed our economy and racked up massive debt for younger generations, Taiwan is steaming ahead. And that's despite its large markets in Europe and America suffering economically due to the virus. Taiwan has hardly had a blip. Why? How can that be? Several words: data, plan, leadership, trust, and truth. That's the secret to Taiwan and other countries similar to Taiwan. They're not the only ones. They acted quickly, closed their borders. Following SARS in 2003, Taiwan established a central command centre for epidemics. By January 2020, the command centre was coordinating the government's response to the coronavirus. It quickly compiled a list of 100 action items, including border controls, school and work policies, public communication plans, and resource assessments of hospitals. Taiwan's government introduced a travel ban on visitors from China, Hong Kong and Macau, soon after the number of coronaviruses began to rise in mainland China. Anticipating the high demand for masks in late January, the Taiwanese government started rationing the existing supply of masks. Taiwan then leveraged the strength of its manufacturing sector and invested approximately $6.8 million to create 60 new mask production lines. This increased Taiwan's daily mask production capacity from 1.8 million masks to 8 million masks. This has been called Taiwan's mask miracle. The proof is in the pudding. They have, as I said, 7 COVID deaths compared with Australia's 652, and yet they were exposed to it earlier. They have technology for early detection. The Taiwanese government has also used data technology to help medical personnel identify and trace suspected patients and high-risk individuals. The Taiwanese government also provides support for those put under quarantine. Local village leaders, for example, will bring a bag of basic supplies like food or books to quarantined individuals. They didn't lock up everyone, they locked up the sick and the vulnerable. And then they say, that's the way democracies are handling quarantine during the coronavirus outbreak. And it's very different from authoritarian governments. Compare Taiwan with mainland China. This is the case where democracies should leverage their data and technologies appropriately so they can triage people to the right place and follow up with appropriate care. We did not behave like a democracy. Taiwan's strategy was the opposite of ours. Taiwan isolated the sick and the vulnerable and let everyone else get on with their work and social lives. And they've had 1/90th of the deaths that Australia's had. Less. They've had about 8%. Taiwan focused on people's lives, remembering medium-term and long-term and immediate issues. People's health in Taiwan is number one. And because of that, their economy has continued beating hard. So as I said, the key ingredients, data. The Taiwanese had the data, they gathered the data. If they didn't have it, they went out and got it. And then they shared that data. They trusted their people. They developed a plan very quickly. And they shared that plan with their people. Contrast that with our Prime Minister's 6 months hibernation. 6 months hibernation. 6 months hibernation, and we still haven't seen a solid plan. We have been told lots of times what's happened and what has been happening and what has been done, but we aren't being told what will be done. The Taiwanese did. That's leadership. And the Taiwanese leaders trusted the people with the data and the facts and with the plan. And they shared the responsibility on business owners, to manage their workplaces, to keep people safe. Contrast that with Australia. Severe lockdowns, severe punishments. And when we ran out of masks early on, our state and federal political leaders said, masks are not effective, don't worry about it. When we eventually built up a stockpile of masks, political leaders changed their tune and said masks are essential. Which one do we trust? Which story? Trust is built on truth. There's no way around that. Trust is built on truth. Trust is built on truth. When leaders lack data, lack a plan, lack trust and don't give trust, they are eventually exposed. And that's what we're seeing now. The Prime Minister, the Victorian Premier and the Queensland Premier have been exposed and are being exposed. Not just on coronavirus, on the mess our country was in before February, before the virus arrived on our shores. Think about the real issue here beyond coronavirus, the recovery. The Prime Minister, the Premiers are focused on recovering back to February. They haven't got a clue how to do it, but that's the economic level they want to get back to. We should be focused instead on the economic strength when we were #1 in the world for gross per capita, gross domestic product per person, income per person. The coronavirus revealed, as we said early on in March, our country's demise since 1944. The loss of our manufacturing. We are now ranked with underdeveloped nations in the sophistication or the lack of sophistication of our manufacturing. Why? Because we've jacked up energy prices 3 times, triple what they were. We've replaced our independence with interdependency, which is really another word for dependency. We've destroyed our economic resilience, our economic sovereignty and productive capacity, thanks to the UN's 1975 Lima Agreement that Labor signed in 1975 and the Liberals ratified the next year. We shipped our jobs to China. That shipping of jobs and that destruction of our capacity, productive capacity, continued with the 1992 UN Rio Declaration that Labor signed and the Liberal nationals implemented. Then the UN's 1996 Kyoto Climate Protocol that destroyed our electricity sector and for which the Howard government stole farmers' rights to use the land that farmers had bought and owned. Then the UN's 2015 Paris Agreement that the National Liberals signed to accelerate the destruction of industry, manufacturing, agriculture, trade-exposed industries. And then, as I said, we heard the Prime Minister's initial response. 6 months hibernation, no plan, no data. 6 months hibernation, no data, no plan. 6 months hibernation. Stories about what we have done or what we did do rather than what we will do. Now we have calls for a plan, as I said, to get back to the February level of performance. Still no data, still no plan. And why after 80 years, almost 80 years of pandering to foreign agreements, we are living in declining living standards, higher costs of living. Why not aim to be #1 in per capita income? Get down to the basics. That's where we were in the early years of our federation. But now, instead of having competitive federalism, we have competitive welfareism thanks to Chairman Dan. Chairman Dan, sloppiness in Victoria led to complete breakdown of the virus there and the rest of
Mr. Senator Roberts, you must refer to the Premier by his title or his correct name.
Premier Daniel Andrews. Thank you for the clarification. We said from the start in One Nation that we need to treat the virus seriously. We said we must put lives first. We said there's no manual. We said we were understanding. We said we would support an open checkbook, do whatever's necessary. And we said we would come looking and hold people accountable. Accountability. The Queensland Premier has said she's handed control to the Chief Health Officer, Dr. Young, who honestly admitted that her sole responsibility is people's physical health. Who's going to manage the economic health? Who's going to manage people's mental health? Experts now estimate that the number of deaths from suicide will be far greater than the deaths from COVID. So Queensland, Labor has abdicated yet again. They've tossed over the running of the state to a health officer who's focused only on physical health, not mental health, not economic health. Just as the real Labor former MP, Joanne Miller, courageously publicly said today, Labor has abandoned us. Labor has abandoned us in Queensland. I listen to Neil Breen on 4BC in the mornings, and I commend him for holding the government accountable. Stories of Labor control freaks being so heartless. Twins flown to Sydney for 16 hours on a 16-hour trip rather than a half-hour helicopter ride to Brisbane to get treatment. One of the twins dying. Cancer treatment for a Ballina woman denied just south of the border. An infant under cancer treatment in hospital alone and needing his mum abandoned. Suicides. A newsagent in Currumbin who couldn't to get there from the Tweed had to drive to Sydney, fly to Brisbane, drive to and stay in quarantine, then drive to Currumbin. I mean, these are insane things. And then the Queensland Premier, remember, welcomed the Black Lives Matter protesters. 30,000 people on our streets spreading the virus. The Prime Minister created the National Cabinet, which is handy for dodging the blame if it goes pear-shaped. And Senator Patrick, I must commend him for pointing out the messy failure. The Prime Minister created a monster. The Premiers and the Prime Minister making decisions without data. I wrote a letter, Madam Acting Deputy President, to the Queensland Premier some time ago, a few weeks ago, calling for her to provide the data on which she bases her decisions. She pointed to 2 websites. Our staff went there, no data. Let's look at the symptoms of what's going on in our nation. We've handed sovereignty to foreign agencies. Matthias Cormann, Senator Cormann, today, in representing the Prime Minister, his response to my question was we are going to live up to our international obligations. To hell with the international obligations. Let's put foreigners behind Australia's people. We have an obligation in this Senate, in this Parliament, to Australian people. Look at the Water Act that's gutting our Water Act of 2007 that's gutting our food production, our Murray-Darling Basin. Look at our energy policy, where we've gone from the lowest cost electricity to the highest cost electricity. Why aren't Australians getting the benefit of our wonderful high energy, low pollution coal, clean coal? Why are our farmers losing their rights to use their land? Why are Hunter Valley coal miners with no protection, no safety protection, told to not report accidents or be sacked, no workers' compensation, no accident pay, 40% underpaid compared to permanents right next door to them in the same job on the same mine site, long service leave contributions not being tallied correctly, and refusing to be audited until I came onto the scene. No leave, no protection, abandoned by the state government, abandoned by federal government agencies, abandoned by the Hunter Valley CFMMU that made deals with employers, undermining these miners. Local, state and federal Labor MPs like Mr Joel Fitzgibbon abandoning them. In Queensland Labor, controlling farmers, misquoting the science, misrepresenting the science to control farmers. So what we see is now control. And we see from Katrina Grace Kelly writing in The Australian, after all this time, meaning 7 months, we still haven't got a recovery plan. It's not just me that thinks this way. And then we've got Terry McCrann waiting for Godot, from one debacle to the next while we wait for a vaccine. This is hopeless. It is absolutely hopeless. It is an abdication of responsibility, an abdication of accountability. We need trust, truth, based on data, for a plan to ensure recovery, back to Australia being #1 in the world for per capita income. We would start with just a simple plan to recover from COVID. Because at the moment, as I said in my introduction to this speech, Australians are slaves. We are slaves to COVID. We know that there's a second wave coming. It started in Victoria. What are we going to do? Is going to stay locked up until this is all, and until everyone has had many, many waves and we lock down each time? That's no way to run a country. That's not leadership. That's abdication. We need strong leadership, like Taiwan, and we need to get it quickly. Instead of being slaves to COVID, we need to master COVID. Taiwan has shown us. Sweden has shown us to some extent. You don't have to agree with their ideas, but at least they've tried something. Israel has mastered COVID. Singapore is mastering COVID. South Korea. Taiwan's not the only one. We need to get on with the job of eating humble pie, admitting our mistakes, getting the data, telling the truth, developing a plan, providing real leadership. That's what the people expect. That's what we deserve. And that's what One Nation is going to continue to push for. We are going to expose the shortfalls in this government, the shortfalls in the last 80 years of this government, and then we are going to put Australia on the right track. And we are keen to see the Nationals today at least recognising some of the things we've been saying and doing. So there is hope, but we must get by with the truth, trust.
Senator Roberts, your time has expired.